Hey guys, Sebastian here with another Cardano video. This time I'm going over the May 17th update. And I'm gonna try a different format this week, which is to say, first I'm gonna go over the report very briefly, and then I'll go into more detail later. That way people who are interested in just kind of the overview can watch the first part of the video. People who want all the details can kind of watch the whole thing. If you like this format, please let me know. I'm always looking for feedback for the format for these videos. So first off, talking about exchanges and the V1 API. So they're talking about test coverage, making sure there are no problems. They're also talking about another test, which is to validate Swagger JSON. That's to say, Swagger is like a tool that they've been using to generate these JSON endpoints, these full API endpoints. And they want to make sure that whenever they make a change to the code, it doesn't accidentally change like the way the paths are generated, which has happened before, and they fixed that bug. So this is trying to like prevent that from happening in the future. Next up, they're talking about Daedalus. So we'll kind of go into more detail later, but like for now, Daedalus, they're talking about the next release that has been going through QA. So they found a bug actually a few bugs, and they fixed it. Charles mentioned that he's hoping that this will still, despite the bugs they found, they've all been fixed, and he's hoping that the release will be at the end of this month, and it'll contain stuff like paper wallet, async, restore, all this kind of good stuff that people have been waiting for. So that's the progress on that. They fixed a few UI bugs, which I'll show you guys. I showed you guys this in the previous week's video. Which a bunch of like minor UI bugs, not anything major. I think it's more exciting is they reworked the Interprocess Communication with Electron and the Cardano API. So if you don't know, Electron's like a library for creating these applications on your desktop that work with JavaScript, and it interacts with the Cardano settlement layer. And so this is kind of what they're talking about. And actually, this might not sound like that big of a deal, but I think it's pretty exciting. I'll kind of like go into that more in the detailed part of this video as we get to it. Next up is the change to the React polymorph library. I've talked about this in the past. This is a library they use inside the Cardano, the Daedalus wallet to render UI. So they're just doing some more test coverage first to make sure there are no problems. Next up, for the wallet backend, they're talking about the incorrect issue with balance. I think this issue was this used to come up fairly often before, and I haven't heard about it either for a while. So they're saying like they think it's fixed, and I think it's because I think they fixed it in the past. And so if you've had this issue recently, like please let the team know, because they think they fixed it. It seems like they fixed it, but they want to make sure. Next up, we're talking about the TLS check. So this is to make sure that when Daedalus or somebody using the API communicates with the Cardano SL, it's done through a secure manner. And they made an improvement to this recently. I think it may have been like a shipping blocker for the 1.2 release possibly. Was that it used to check that an entire folder was either present or not. And now with a new change they've made, it'll check whether individual files, the keys and certs are all, whether or not they're there individually. And if they're not, it'll run cert generation util that was made and regenerate the files. So it's kind of like a slight bug fix, I guess, in a sense, for this task. But the TLS check is like mostly done, I think. Another thing they're talking about is a bug that an exchange is having with high and recurrent IO traffic that they think they fixed. I have no background on this because I'm not privy to the conversations between exchanges, so I'm not sure what this is, but it's nice to know that an exchange like fixed the problem, I guess. Next up, they're talking about the spec that's been put up on the website. Hopefully you guys saw that. I'll show you to you guys briefly later in this video. And they're talking about how the spec is, you know, they've got the version 1.1 out, and they have still like one remaining section on input selection and how to do that more gracefully. They have like a section already right now, but they want to like do a more in-depth analysis on it. But they've gone through a lot of the code to implement the wallet spec. So in the past week, they did let's see, I don't remember off the top of my head, but they did inputs selection, I think. Actually, I have it over here. I can check briefly for you guys. And I'll go into more until later. Yeah, sorry, transaction submissions is one thing they worked on. They also worked on rollbacks and metadata. So we'll go into more details later. That's kind of the 3 things they worked on for code-wise in the past week. And yeah, so back to the API. API version 1 is quote-unquote done, I guess. Or should I say completed. We'll see if there are more bugs. Right now, it went through a lot of the updates with you guys as they were building it. And they're saying it'll be ready for release 1.2, which is really exciting. And they're looking for feedback. So if you upgrade to 1.2 when it comes out and use this new API and you have some feedback, they're looking forward for that. So please let them know if you're a developer. Next up, they're talking about networking change. So this is like some networking change that like some bugs they found, I think, are like a speed up. And I have no background on this because I don't think they've put any code for this out yet. So we may see like exactly what this is in coming weeks. But I think this is like related to like a profiling to make sure that they don't introduce any performance issues as they create new features. Next up, they're talking about smooth block syncing and progress bar, which I think would be a cool feature for Daedalus. So right now, if you open up Daedalus, like most of the time I'll say like syncing 90% done, and you're waiting for like 90 to 100. And I think what they're saying is that they would like to have like a smoother syncing, and also so instead of like 90 to 100, it'll say like from where your sync point to 100%, it'll go like 0 to 100. I think is what they're talking about. I'm not sure if it's like the most important feature. It'd be nice to have. But they've been working on like a block syncing itself for a while now, for quite a few months now. So we'll go into more detail on that later in this video also. Next up, they're talking about QA efforts, quality assurance. So Charles mentioned multiple times they're trying to build up a QA pipeline. They've hired quite a few people on this. I think they're still hiring like 1 or 2 people according to the job openings. We'll go into that more later. But they're saying how they used to not do that many releases. So if like September is their first mainnet release, and they had to release every few months. And Charles mentioned in the past he's trying to get monthly releases, and so they're kind of like working towards that, building up a pipeline to be able to make more quicker and more reliable releases of Cardano SL and Daedalus. So this is pretty exciting. They're also talking about the Testnet launch, which is coming up. There's 2 testnets. One of them should come at the end of the month. This is the KVM one, and the other one is Yella. It should be at the end of July, I believe, sometime in July. So talking about they're working on that. I showed you guys last week that they made Faucet for the testnet, or at least a framework for a Faucet for a testnet. So we'll go into more details on that later. That's pretty exciting. And one thing that I thought was really good is that they're where to say that exactly? So they're using the IPC, the Interprocess Communication mechanism, so that Cardano the settlement layer can advertise which port it's using, and the Daedalus can launch using it, and also Daedalus will be able to relaunch the Cardano SL if something goes wrong. And I think, so people may not realize, but I think this will actually help a lot of problems people have been having. So a lot of times, like when people are trying to connect to network and it kind of fails, they're actually having issues with port 8090, which is the one the Cardano SL uses by default. So that used to be like a hard-coded variable inside the code, and so now they're making it like a more loose setting, and Daedalus will be able to like hook into this config, which is good. And the other thing they're talking about is like they're working on an installer for the testnets, and that'll be a config setting also. And I showed you guys this briefly last week, and I think we'll see it again this week as I go through like the more detailed part of this update. Lastly, they were working on continuous integration, which is every time they make a change to the code, it kind of like rebuilds the entire code base. And they're just saying they're fixing various bugs they had, upgrades in the tooling. It's all good stuff, but you know, this requires like a constant work. Next, they're talking about delegation. So they said they found like a possible issue with chain delegation, which I used to call, if you saw my video in the past, I call it like transitive delegation, and I guess I always call it chain delegation, which is to say like A delegates to B, delegates to C. And so they're kind of working on that. They say it's a minor modification, so hopefully you'll see this paper come out soon, because I think this is the one that people are the most excited for. Next, they're talking about networking. So they've done a lot of changes to the networking part of the code in the past, like I think 2 months or something. I mean, other than blocks and stuff, which they've been working on for much longer, they've been trying to do a lot of changes to the diffusion layer, which orchestrates how peers connect to each other. So I've gone through a few of those updates with you guys in previous weeks. I'll go through some more this week, and they're saying they're doing more research on how to make that better still. And so that's kind of what this is about. And then lastly, they're talking about the KVM test launch and how they're working up with the runtime verification team to make sure there's like a good release. And that's it for this week. So now we're going to go into the more detailed section. But if you're dropping off now, you know, feel free to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, all that good stuff. But now let's get into like some more details. First off, I want to go over some job postings I actually had that I thought was interesting. One thing they're looking for is a Testnet community manager, which will be the person that kind of manages more like a community relations, business relations kind of thing from the IOHK side. So, you know, for the KVM and Yellow virtual machines, all this kind of good stuff. If you're interested in this, I'll have a link in the description along with, you know, a link of all the other things I'm talking about. So if you think you're qualified for this job posting, these are like the requirements right here. You know, you can try and apply. Also, they put up a new posting for development experience manager and another job posting for a software test engineer. So if you're interested in either of those positions, there's going to be a link in the video description. Alright, so first we're going over block consolidation. So I think this is a big issue people don't really realize. I mean, some people realize it, which is to say right now when you sync your blockchain on your computer, the way Cardano SL is set up is it'll create a bunch of really tiny files, and this is trying to consolidate them to larger files. And the way they're doing this for now, it's like not a big change, is they're trying to combine blocks and undos into one file. And so I talked about this, I believe, last week, which they're calling blunt. It's like a block plus undo, and they're hoping that this will like slightly reduce the amount of files on your machine. So it's good they're doing this. I hope they're going to do more work to reduce the amount of files. So I think this is like one of the bottlenecks to loading the blockchain right now. Just the amount of files. The operating systems are not good at handling like a bunch of small files. Next up, this is the Cardano Faucet package that they've been working on. I showed you guys this briefly last week. So if you're interested, they now have the full pull request up for that. And you can go check that out, see how the Faucet package will work. And there's going to be a link in the description. For Daedalus, they had a few changes. One of them is they added on the ADA Redemption tab an option for like a regular recovery force vended. You don't need to care about this if you're not part of the ICO. This is only like for people that are part of the ICO. But some people who are part of the ICO might be interested in this, like a new feature they're adding. Next, they made a change to improve the build time, which is good if you've ever tried to like build something on top of Daedalus for whatever reason. This will like make that faster, which is good to have. More user-facing is they made a change to the way files are packed into the Daedalus itself. So if you don't know, there's like tools like Webpack or these other like JavaScript frameworks that essentially take assets and embed them into the application. And they're talking about how they didn't really need that, and how it took a little time. So by disabling that, it made like the test run faster. It made the wallet open up faster. All this kind of good stuff. This is like a nice to have. And lastly, they made a change to like fix up the Cardano team credits where they accidentally had the same name twice. So just like a small UI fix. Next up, this is what we were talking about earlier with the Interprocess Communication. So they're talking about if we were pointing to port 8090, this will have a way of letting Daedalus know about it. So this is a change on the Cardano SL side, and then this is a relevant change on the Daedalus side, which kind of supports Daedalus to connect to Cardano SL, and then also launch it, so relaunch it if something goes wrong. So these are the 2 pull requests to look at if you're interested in that feature. This is the pull request for the Testnet installer. So I didn't bring this up, but there's like a setting, at least I'm in here. So like in your network, you'll now have like a mainnet, staging, and testnet. So that's nice to have. So that's the other thing. This is like not done yet, but this is like what they're working on to create the testnet installer. For the Cardano SL release I mentioned earlier, they had a bug fix they made 4 days ago now, and this is for like the release, the 1.2 release that's supposed to be by the end of the month. And so they've had 6 release candidates so far, according to Charles. But they fixed all these issues, and hopefully it'll be done soon. This is the release from the Daedalus side. So you can see they did the async wallet restore, a few UI changes, spending passwords on by default, paper wallet generation will be there, all this kind of good stuff. And next, this is the fix that they're talking about in the report, which is to say that whenever you launch and there's like a missing TLS file, it'll restore based on the individual files as opposed to the folder itself. So this is what I was talking about in the report earlier. So if you're interested in that, you can go check out this folder, or so this pull request. Next up is the wallet specification change they've been making. So if you haven't seen the wallet specification, it's available on the Cardano docs. This is kind of what it looks like. It's got quite a few sections in there. It's like a partially high-level read like this, where you don't need to know that much math, and then partially like a more Haskell-like math-like sections. So you may be interested if you have like kind of like interested in how the wallet works, and also you have like a math background. But related to this, they have 3 changes. One of them is in the persistent storage of transaction metadata. And in those specifications, talking about how there's like 2 kinds of metadata. It's metadata for transactions and metadata for blocks. So metadata for transactions is supposed to be like these pure metadata with no side effects, whereas the block metadata will rely on the state of the blockchain. And so that's kind of what they're handling here. They also handle the transaction submission from the wallet spec, which is say whenever you want to submit transactions, they actually have like a different part of the settlement layer, which is just in charge of like scheduling and managing these submissions. And it communicates independently with like the rest of the settlement layer. And kind of the way it works is that it tries to send transactions and waits a certain amount of time and sees did it work, did it not work. If it didn't work, try resending it. Maybe try a few times. If it still doesn't work, maybe notify the end user about the problem. It does stuff like manages the pending transactions, if like a transaction gets canceled, if a rollback happens, all this kind of stuff. So that's part of the spec if you're interested in reading more about how this works, and this is the code for it. And next, this is Rollback Invariance. This was a bug fix that they had in one of the previous release candidates. They fixed essentially whenever they roll back, they want to make sure that the blockchain can be rolled back safely in case the longest changes. Like imagine you apply 2 blocks and you realize, oh wait, I'm on the wrong chain, it's a longer change. You have to undo the 2 blocks and switch chains. This is what this is about. Next, this is like not really user facing. I thought some people may be interested if you're more like a technical person. Which is that they have like Matt who works for IOHK introduced a new way to get better REPL, which is read eval print loop, using a tool called GHCID. So if you're interested in the tool, you can the way he set up, you can go check out this pull request. If you're interested in kind of more details, he actually put out a blog post on the subject. So I'll have a link to the blog post also in the video description. Next, we're talking about core asset security. So what this is essentially, the settlement layer doesn't have multi-sig wallets yet. So IOHK essentially put this pull request here to secure their own funds until they have multi-sigs ready. So this is just like a kind of temporary patchwork until multi-sigs are available to make sure like IHK's assets are like safer. Next, they split the new wallet into two like ways to install. One of them is Cardano SL Wallet New Static. So this is like if you're a developer and you want to set up the wallet new on your like a machine for like development purposes, it will now be easier to just run the Cardano SL Wallet New Static command, and that'll pull down the pre-built statically linked binaries for you, which is significantly easier than trying to do it the other way. So there's already this like a static version of the previous tools, and now they added the one for the wallet new, which is like the, if you don't know what the wallet new is, this is the one with the V1 API. Next, they're talking about structured logs. So they're adding like a structured logs to the reporting system with Katip, which is a structured logging framework. So I remember in the past, like probably in January or so, they were talking about adding structured logging, and they had like a debate about whether we should have structured logging, which is like a more human readable, or sorry, more computer readable, or like a more human friendly, like not as structured logging. And so this is like more on the structured logging side that they're now working on. Next up, which is of interest, is the external wallets. So they had quite a few changes. I mean, they're still working on this hardware wallet support, external wallet support. So they had one change, which was the CHW base. I don't know what CHW stands for, but they had two things they added. One is like the new external wallet API, which I showed you guys in previous weeks, which is to create unsigned transactions. They also have the new address path, which I also showed you guys in previous weeks, which is how to make, over here, an address that conforms to the BIP44 spec, which you need to create these kind of wallets that can contain multiple currencies, i.e. hardware wallets. So they're working on that also. You can see they kind of like have new structure inside the code for how to deal with external wallets. So if you're looking for the hardware wallets, this is like exciting change and good progress. And yeah, this like if you're wondering why this pull request is closed, because it's like superseded by this other pull request. So this is where the work is happening now. Lastly, the Fusion change. They've been making a lot of changes to the network stack, make it more testable, more efficient. Some general refactoring changes to make the code better. This is all stuff that they've been working on for a while, which is why they've had to have like multiple installments. They have a 5th installment. They actually have like later on like a 6th installment. Of all the changes that have been like piling up over time. And so some stuff in here also involves stuff like the change for the block sync system that they've been working on for a while. I think they had like a few stuff in there for that also. So hopefully this will translate to some like a good user side speed ups. But one of the other things they had is that they're fixing a bug, or like not a real bug, but like an inefficiency in the system where you realize in some place there are some blocks that are getting like a serialized and deserialized or after, maybe it's the other way around, but like one of them is like, it was like redundant, and so they did this change to make like the diffusion layer go a bit faster as it communicates with the database layer. And that's all the updates I had for this week. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you enjoyed this new format. If you like this new format, please let me know. Leave a comment. As always, you know, if you want more updates, you can follow me on YouTube, Twitter, all those kind of platforms, and I'll try and keep you guys updated as, you know, IOHK makes more progress. Thank you.